Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On tonight's show, I have a returning guest, a very special guest. His name is Igor Sarsky. We talked back in August 7th, 2020, to be exact, about similarities between a group called the Order of Nine Angles and what I've been researching now for almost like 4 or 5 years, what's known as the Smiley face killers phenomenon. And that was really one of my most listened to and commented episodes, was our discussion back in August 7th, 2020. And in the interim between now and back then, I've written 6 articles that are on my website, William Ramsey Investigates, and I'll probably talk about those tonight and tie in some of that information. Igor has tons of new information we can talk about, but the titles of my articles, if you want to reference those at William Ramsey Investigates, are SFK Mystery Revealed, SFK Mystery Revealed, Culling the Mundanes Part 2, Shandon Simpson in the ONA, Ryan Fleming in the ONA, Ethan Meltzer culling in the ONA, and William von Neuchegem culling in the ONA. And those are all very recent, either terroristic threatening cases or actual murder cases that have happened within probably the last couple of years that involved either people in the military or just random people who've been caught. William von Neuchegem, that was on video. It's pretty graphic video. Stalked this poor older Muslim guy outside of Toronto and slit his throat. And he had in his social media pretty graphic, a very obvious ONA ritual taking place where he was doing the chanting. He had the Order of Nine Angles symbol, the crystals, and he's suspected of killing at least one other person. There's a tie-in, another knife murder that took place close to there in Toronto. So if people want to hear about that, but there's a lot of new interesting research, and I'm delighted that Igor is here with us. Igor, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Will. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for agreeing to the universe. So there's a lot I can talk about, just updates and things like that having to do with this case. But what have you been up to in the interim? Can you just want to do just kind of like a brief intro, or how do you want to approach?
Sure. I mean, it's good to be here tonight. I mean, speaking about something other than COVID and politics.
Yeah.
It's a little bit refreshing. But I mean, I've steadily been working, throughout the last 4 months after the second video, trying to kind of find new pieces of literature that kind of apply, but also kind of discussing the case with other people who are emailing me and chasing down leads that them and I have been kind of discussing. So I've been quite busy, and I'm kind of interested or excited to get going here with you today. So.
Yeah, go for it. Which kind of new piece of information do you want to get started with, or understandings of this phenomenon?
Well, so I mean, last time we were discussing a lot about their motive for culling, and that it was their way to affect aeonic change. Right. And as I delved further into that, I realized that there was actually a very important connection to water within that, which I actually wasn't aware of when the first video kind of came out. So I wouldn't mind going into that.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
What I'm referring to is so when they're talking about aeonic change, there's actually ages that they're talking about in terms of which age will it be changed from. So they're talking about the specific aeonic change is the transition from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius.
Right.
Which I thought was interesting originally because I knew Aquarius kind of had water elements, so I started delving down that path when I researched that, and I came across some interesting ONA canon regarding that kind of transfer from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, and how it applies to kind of culling and what is essentially the magnum opus of the ONA, right? Which is the changing of the ages.
Right, like aeonic change, right?
Mm-hmm. So what's so interesting about this? So, I mean, I'm not an expert on this aspect. I mean, somebody like Ken Ami, I'm sure, would have a lot of an easier much easier time discussing this than I would. But I'm going to give it my best shot. And it kind of applies to what the ONA symbol is. So we've discussed it. There's been a flavor of ONA called the Drekians or the Drek,
Right.
which you mentioned in episode 1. The Drek seem to be a group which has taken a more literal interpretation of the canon, so a more kind of hardcore flavor of the ONA, as opposed to kind of lesser or less aggressive interpretations, people who don't necessarily believe in culling but still believe in the ONA. The Dreks certainly believe in culling very, very aggressively. It's one of their central tenets.
And that's kind of like the growth of the ONA comes out of Myatt through this guy who was with Myatt Molt, and then it kind of branches off, right?
Correct.
Different Nexians, right?
Richard Molt, or Christos Beast. I guess we'll call him Christos Beast because I don't know. I don't know if he's like Anton Long in the sense that we don't know for sure who he is. I think Christos Beast is known to be.
That's right. That's the pseudonym for Molt, right?
For Molt, correct. It's known to be him, I'm pretty sure. So what's interesting about the Drek and Molt is that they have a symbol, which is kind of what they've kind of, their own kind of ONA symbol that they've adopted, which is the tricycle. Which is interesting because that kind of relates back to the change of the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius. A lot of people who are following the left-hand path in occult ways know that Saturn is worshipped as a god within the left-hand path. And that the whole, lore of Saturn, which is a Roman god, is, deeply embedded within the left-hand path. And I think you kind of have talked about that a little bit. But in regards to the tricycle, what's so interesting about that is that it is actually a conjoining piece of culling and the water, essentially, right? So you have the bottom of the tricycle, which is a sickle, which is their interpretation of what, should represent culling.
Right. And also it's the sickle of Saturn, right?
Correct.
Saturn has this scythe, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then the trident. So the trident at the top, which is the other half of the symbol, so it's a trident and a sickle, which is why it's called a tricycle, is representing for Neptune, which is the son of Saturn. What is so interesting about this is when you look into the Drekian way and you start reading some of their literature, including literature from Cryptonymus and from Christos Beast, among others, you realize that Neptune is actually connected to Vindex. So I would like to read a little portion of kind of what I've kind of, what kind of connected that for me, if you don't mind, for the viewers.
Please do. Please.
So the symbol of the tricycle, henceforth, this is directly from a piece of or document written by Cryptonymus, who was an outer representative for the ONA for, I think, 5 years, and was a central part in kind of creating the Drek, or I guess continuing the Drekian way. Was Cryptonymus, who's a girl. She was a protege of Richard Molt, who I guess originally created the Drek.
And she wrote tons of literature and kind of followed up with her own zine, right? Her own kind of ONA zine.
Lots of zines. Lots of stuff. And in one of these zines, Neptunium is number 93 on the periodic table. Yes, that's actually interesting. Let's think about this for a second. So the tricycle, right? We're connecting Neptune and Saturn. But in there, as I said, when I was reading, so let me continue on my portion here, because this will explain a little bit and I can analyze after I read it. So the symbol of the tricycle, henceforth, is given over to general Drek population as a symbol of the Drek and the Drekian way. It is a Saturnine symbol representing the ancient god Saturn. It thus also represents Cronus, Father Time, and his golden age. The ancient tradition states that when mankind first lived on the earth, Saturn ruled the world. Unfortunately, Cronus, was dethroned by Zeus. Thus, the paradisiacal golden age of humanity was lost, and the tyrannous age of Zeus began. So you can see there where they're basically saying that the golden age has basically ended, and the Tyrannus age of Zeus began. So the age of Zeus is synonymous with the Magian age, essentially, which is what we discussed in the first aspect, which is what they're kind of against. So as I continue, the trident represents several things. It first is the symbol of the god Neptune, son of Saturn, who, this is very interesting, will avenge and vindicate his father. Thus, Neptune is a Vindex-like character. Being god of the ocean, seas, rain, and bodies of water, Neptune also is then the presiding archetype of the new age of Aquarius. When the Vindex, like Neptune, avenges and vindicates his father, and when Zeus has been dethroned, Saturn will return to once again be king, and shall then usher in a new golden age.
Interesting.
And so the symbolism behind the conjoined trident and sickle is to remind us of that lost age and the memories that still linger deep within the collective psyche of humanity. And that one day, in an aeon to come, that lost age shall return, for time is cyclical. And now this last part I think is really interesting. This is the great alchemical work, the labor of aeonically transmuting the base metal ages into a golden age, right? So that's the magnum opus of the ONA. This is the great alchemical work, right? And some people will know that as the philosopher's stone, right?
Right. So you go back alchemy, right? Original alchemical ideas.
And a lot of people have really have speculated over the past 20 years that alchemy has a huge part to play in the killings of the Smiley Face Killer without even talking about the ONA, which is really interesting.
Right. No, it's very true.
Leads back there as well. But I thought it was interesting because before I always envisioned the Philosopher's Stone as something more tangible. So when I'm seeing it as something, when they're saying you don't actually get to transmute gold like iron into gold or something, you're practically transmuting something in real life from something that's bad into something that's good, right?
Right.
Which is interesting. I never knew that until I started researching this.
Right, something outside of yourself, right? Instead of like the alchemical journey of the individual, you're creating alchemical change. External, right? Isn't that the idea?
Mm-hmm. So what's interesting about this is that they're connecting Neptune with Vindex and saying that Neptune is going to be the presiding archetype over the new Aeon. And we already know from video 1 that culling is the main way where they affect aeonic change.
Right.
Which directly, in my opinion, kind of puts water as a main potential way wherein they would be, utilizing a main potential avenue for culling.
Right. And I mean, I think they also, the ONA thinks that the individual can also be a representation of Vindex.
Correct.
So,
which means somebody can basically read this saying, I can be a representation of Neptune, the son of Saturn, and I will avenge and vindicate his father.
And bring a new age through this action.
Correct.
Gotcha.
And that leads back to the culling works we talked about in video 1, where, they're trying to change, the
age, right?
Yeah, through practical and magical means.
Right. If the ones that really get into the ONA doctrines and believe it, yes, I think you're absolutely right.
So let me continue here on Cryptonymus's views.
Okay.
By Neptune's avenging trident, let the reign of Zeus be abolished. I'm just reading this and I'm thinking to myself how crazy that is for that to be connected to this. Cause the progeny of Cronus his cubic throne to polish. So this is kind of like a poem. Vindex shall return, the crown of emeralds to Saturn's head, and to earth our pagan mother again Saturn shall be wed. Hail to Vindex, may Saturn regain his fire, and may he rule once more a golden age as sire. So it is really interesting because, as I said, they're basically equating Saturn to the pagan mother, right? Saying that Saturn's married to the pagan mother, and that they can put Saturn back on the throne by helping along the change of ages, the aeonic change.
Aeonic change, right?
By practical and magical means, one of which is culling, one of which the Drex have taken quite literally is culling.
Right, and that's what ONA really distinguishes itself from other occult orders is its emphasis on culling, right? Like that's really what sets them apart, at least in some of the writings of What was it, Anton Long, the ones that he wrote to Temple of Set?
So, I mean, I've learned that it's not necessarily every flavor of ONA, because, I mean, what I've quickly realized is that like the Order 9 Angles, because it's not like a structured, it's like a subculture, metaculture,
Right.
that somebody like chooses to identify with, not necessarily like, structure. It has different flavors, right? So you have
Right.
you have your canon from Anton Long, and then you have all the people who have interpreted the canon. So you have your Drex, which are kind of like a pseudo Satanist group. You have your
Right.
neo Nazis, you have your pagans, you have your jihadis, right? All kinds of people where it's proliferated, and they've all had in the vampire flavor even.
Right. So that's the vampire flavor about the guy I talked about. His name was Ryan Fleming. So he was in Nexian, I think somewhere in the Midlands or Yorkshire or something like that. And that was his flavor of ONA, was vampiric something.
Yeah. So, and not every one of these flavors necessarily embodies the culling ethos. Some of them believe it to be more part of the labyrinth kind of aspect of the ONA, and not necessarily to be taken literally. Whereas other flavors take it like Bible and think that, you actually do have to do this to be ONA, and you actually do have to do this to change, to create aeonic change. So the symbol of the Drek essentially conjoins water with culling, with the trident, with the scythe, or with the trident, or the sickle.
Right. So that's the attachment. And you'll see that through all this literature is the trident on top and the sickle on bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Ryan Fleming, his thing, he called himself Sithane, vampiric witchcraft of the Dracon Covenant.
That crazy how insane these flavors are getting, right? Like they're all out of left field, like craziness.
I think he's either in jail now or went to jail. So I don't know what happened to him, but West Yorkshire, that's where he was.
So while we're on this topic, I kind of want to branch off a little bit. So Saturn, in occult circles is known to be equated to the black sun.
Right.
A lot of people know this. I guess practically speaking, Saturn was the sun of the galaxy at one point, I guess is what, I mean, essentially that's what they say, or the sun was, there was a sun there and now it's a black sun. Regardless.
Right, so that's the sun in red, right?
Yeah. I want to go down this path because I think it actually leads to kind of where your research began.
Okay.
I mean, we'll get more in depth and like directly towards the smiley face killer, but I think that this is important to address before we kind of get closer towards the smiley face killer.
Okay.
So I'm going to read. So during the later years of the Atlantean civilization, certain mystics and artists began to speak of a black sun rising over their lands and an apocalyptic future approaching. These mystics adopted the symbol of the black sun, such as those shown below, which they wore on their clothing, painted on their temples, and tattooed on their flesh. So you'll see that an apocalyptic future approaching, that can be equated to the nihilist philosophy, right? That the entire world is going to die, and that nothing matters, and that's continuing on. At first, this strange cult was ignored or laughed at by the satisfied citizens of the Atlantean kingdom. After all, Atlantis had known prosperity, security, and glory for as long as anyone could remember, and was in no danger of falling into darkness. Surely the Atlanteans have won the favor of their gods, which they honored dutifully in their temples to the white sun, the moon, the stars, and the spirits of nature. However, fewer laughed at the black sunites when a series of misfortunes befell Atlantis. Not long after their appearance, earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis rocked the kingdom. Wars against outland barbarians went badly. Sea raiders harassed coastal towns with impunity. Distrust, fear, hatred began to divide the people. Once noble leaders grew greedy and corrupt. It seemed that a black sun had indeed arisen over the leaders of the white sun, and a golden age of civilization was drawing to a close. Now, does that ring a bell? A golden age of civilization?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Saturn. So amidst this chaos and unrest, the Black Sun cult began to rapidly gain influence, and its sinister black temples began to appear, first in remote regions, then in cities as conditions grew more dire, and the cult became more brazen. The cult soon developed into a powerful religious order known as Black Sun Order, and you'll recognize the Black Sun Order from Nazism in the
Right.
Wolfsburg castle, where they had the Black Sun painted on the ground.
That was the SS headquarters under Himmler.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. You know exactly good. And
he had 12,000 occult manuscripts in his library. I think his library is in Czechoslovakia now or something.
So this is where they adopted that lore from. So occult Nazism was adopted directly from the story that I'm telling you currently, which is what's so interesting. So eventually, the entire population of Atlantis would be split by this great religious divide. The white Atlanteans being those who favored the older white sun religion, with its creed of peace, progress, and benevolent cosmos that shone down its favors upon the people of Atlantis. And the Black Atlanteans being those who sided with the newer Black Sunset, with its creed of conflict, conquest, and hostile cosmos that would destroy Atlantis and all the things and fires, and all things in the fires of the Black Sun, right? So the epitome of a nihilist philosophy.
Right.
Couldn't get more nihilist than that. That is literally I would say the root of the entire nihilist perspective came from kind of this kind of occult story / ethos.
The mythos of Atlantis.
Yes, the mythos, correct. Yes. I'm just going to see if there's anything more important here that I want to say.
But it is interesting because you'll see this Sonnenrad, the black hole sun, is all the way up on this guy who I studied, Chandon Simpson, who was literally a National Guardsman during the Black Lives Matter riots at the White House, and I think he got kicked out or something like that. But he had that symbol of the black hole sun, or the Sonnenrad, in his social media.
Exactly.
So this is very current stuff. It's definitely part. And Chandon Simpson was actually at Charlottesville. So there's a picture of him at Charlottesville.
So let's bring it back to why this is important. So as you would know, and as your viewers may know, you dealt a lot about Watchmen and the significance of the smiley face.
Right.
Now,
Alan Moore's Watchmen, right?
Now, I was never the largest proponent of the smiley face angle. In fact, I kind of had a feeling that it was more kind of, it was kind of a dead end in the sense that it would never be solved through the smiley face angle. It would be solved through more practical angles. However, some recent events have really kind of made me change my course.
Okay. What are those recent events?
Yeah, I mean, one of which, as you know, is the Lapis Philosophicus website, which is one of the main, if not the main, website to go for ONA canon. They basically have pretty much everything there.
They have like a 2,000-page document with all their stuff in it.
Yeah, right? all kinds of stuff there. About the best place you can go aside from Scribd, but Scribd isn't really a website because it's a compilation of everything other people have put together, so it doesn't really count. Although I would recommend using Scribd, it's pretty good. But the Lapis website, as I was reviewing it, I looked at the top right corner and I saw a smiley face emoticon, and I'm like, okay, what the hell? That must be just for this page. No, I go to every page and I realize it's embedded in the actual website. And I'm thinking to myself, why would they embed that emoticon in the top right on kind of every single page from the website as a kind of title in a sense? Like, right?
Right.
I wouldn't even know what to describe it. It's in the top right and it's embedded and it's a little smiley face emoticon. Right. And I really thought to myself, I'm like, why would they put that there? And I basically told myself, I'm going to find out why they would put that there, what meaning that has to them. Because that was too much of a coincidence in terms of what my research has been focusing on. And
right. I mean, it is remarkable. I mean, that's a direct tie between ONA and this whole phenomenon, right?
Correct.
Or symbolical tie. Why it's there? Why is it there in all the killings? I don't know.
Correct. So
why is somebody tagging it?
Which is what's so interesting is it actually affirms what you were talking about earlier with the smiley face. You were discussing the relevance of it within the kind of pop culture.
Right.
and how within Watchmen it represented a nihilist philosophy, right?
Yes, the
Philosophy.
comedian, right? They laugh at it all too, right?
Yeah, the entire world is basically screwed, and there's no other thing to do in that situation but just laugh at the entire situation of it all.
Yeah, while you're killing people too, right? So he kills his pregnant wife or the mother of his child, right?
As he's laughing,
Shoots her, right?
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. So right there, you basically have your connection to the ONA, because the ONA, as you see when you're going through a lot of their material, they have adopted this black sun, Saturn kind of mythos, right?
right,
The Drekians in particular. So,
right. No, so it's like it's pretty remarkable that you're seeing these tie-ins. Yeah,
so what's as I said, what's so interesting is the connection to you have the connection to nihilism. So you basically have an ONA member who has deep connections to this mythos of nihilism and black sun and Saturn, and that's what this bloody smiley face, or technically a smiley face after a murder, which is a bloody smiley face in a sense, right, could
right,
potentially mean.
right,
And I do believe on the Lapis Philosophical website, the reason why they did put it there is because it represents nihilism. I don't see any other plausible avenue. There are extremely deep ties. They talk about nihilism in all sorts of ONA literature. And the smiley face, as we talked about before, has direct pop culture connections to nihilism. So I don't know what other reason why they would have put that there in such an important position on such an important website.
right. I mean, there's tons in the occult. They're all over the place on so many different movies. Even this most recent movie they came out, the Smiley Face Killers, uses the smiley face all over it, which just came out. What, 2020?
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to pop up the YouTube chat. I wonder if there's anyone in YouTube chat talking.
It would pop up.
Does this connect? Okay, good.
It does connect to YouTube, but I had to start a new channel because I got kicked off.
No, I know. I just was making sure because I didn't know. But I'm not too worried anyways, because I know that a lot of people are not going to be here tonight, but still are interested in what's going on.
Oh, yeah. No, it'll go out on all my channels and stuff on the podcast as well.
Yeah, I mean,
the only place where there isn't any censorship yet. I would expect the censorship is coming, but the podcast community seems to be censorship free.
You've had a tumultuous 2 weeks with social media, haven't you?
Oh man, no, I'm not going back. I'm not going back to Facebook or Twitter. No way. I'm not going to. YouTube, I'll have a different relationship with, but yeah, I'm a big free speech person, and I never insulted anybody. What YouTube claimed for me was nonsense. They couldn't back it up, and it was from videos 4 or 5 years ago. So supposedly they just keyed into I was harassing somebody 4 years ago. It's a joke. But actually, it's kind of interesting because you and I had discussed Antinous, right? And so one of the videos was my discussion of the guy from Comet Pizza and Antinous, the importance of Antinous. And I guess that's what got me flagged. That was one of my strikes.
Oh, the Comet Pizza. Yeah, I guess because of the harassment, the alleged harassment. I mean, who the hell knows what really happened there? But
nobody does. I mean, I just was investigating. I did not harass that guy.
No, I'm saying the alleged harassment of Comet Pizza, right? So allegedly there was like a gunman who went in there and then they cracked down on people on social media who were talking bad about them after the gunman in the spirit of preventing people from getting injured, but really, I mean, they're just silencing people from talking about it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons why they want to silence me off YouTube, so whatever.
Okay, but we can
anyway.
So when I read this, I connected the smiley face to the black sun, to Saturn, to culling, right? Because you have Saturn, and that's the presiding person over the age, and you have Neptune. Neptune is the presiding person over the new age of Aquarius, and he will bring Saturn back to the throne. So everything connects here. The smiley face, the black sun. Nihilism, the ONA, which is, I mean, I have to dive deeper into it as I speak about it today. I think in my head that I have to dive deeper into that theory, but I'm hoping that other people hear about that today and kind of work that kind of angle as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. These people are using PGP to discuss issues on the back of some of those zines where, pretty good privacy codes, very sophisticated, pretty sophisticated cryptography. So you don't really know what they're really talking about sharing with each other.
Mm-hmm.
But that was actually one of the things that was speculated during, about the Smiley Face killings is how are these people communicating over the internet? And there's something right there is they're using cryptography.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not hard to communicate over the internet or find ways to, or find secure servers to. I mean, it's you just need to work at it and figure out a way, but it's possible. I mean,
Right.
I'm not shocked to hear that people are, trading secrets over the internet on how to, get away more or get away with practical killings, right?
Right.
So
what else do you want to cover?
yeah, so let's continue on that. So I read that and I really focused on Cryptonymous because I thought to myself, okay, you have a flavor of the ONA that really takes culling literally. The head of that flavor is the outer representative of the entire Order of Nine Angles, which shows how important that flavor actually is. And this representative admitted in her signs that she was the main point of contact between the entire outer world and the ONA for, I think, 4 or 5 years, which means she would have been the main person anyone would have talked to regarding culling. So if you're just a random person off the street reading this stuff and you get as far as I got and you say, I want to commit a culling, how am I going to do it? You message Cryptonymous at that time, who was, very, very active online, very active with ONA members, prospective ONA members, as she states in her signs, what she states. So I really thought that she could be a potential to focus on. So I started reading these signs because this came from the first sign. This the poem about the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, Neptune, Saturn that I originally read came from one of her first signs, which also shows how important it is. She has about 13 to 14 signs. This came from the very first one. So it shows how important it is to the greater metaculture of the ONA, and particularly the Drex. But there's also some more interesting stuff in her signs. More than I could ever address tonight. As I sit here, I'm trying to figure out what I want to talk about. But I think the ones that connect to water are most important for your viewers to hear.
Yeah, I mean, and you and I have discussed about some of those. What particularly would you like to address?
Okay, so in one of her signs is a poem called "The Fractured Flowing Sea," and this can be found on Lapis Philosophicus website, like mostly everything from the ONA can. The website with the smiley tag on it. It's this story is a little confusing. I had to read it probably about 10 times, but the more I read it, the more it actually eerily connected to exactly what's happening, kind of with the Smiley Face Killers. And a lot of it is kind of, a little bit on the mythos side, but essentially, let me start reading a little bit.
Okay.
So, because the story is called Fractured Flowing Sea. It's a short story, and that's kind of. So let me start reading from the short story. So, silently unseen, they come ashore in various places. There, from their restful lair beneath such offshore seas as hides them, come ashore to especially seek out the young, the vulnerable, whom they entice to suicide, to murder, and to death, and whom they sometimes steal alive, breathing. For, this is an important part, it is the acasual energy, the very animator of mortal human life, that they, these shapeshifters, need acquire at the very moment of human dying, when such humans give up such mortal, limited, casual lives, and makes and marks them as but temporary, mundane vessels for that acasual energy that is the essence of their very cosmos. So the story starts out with these shapeshifters who can be described as probably a-casual beings. So they're not actually in the casual realm, right? They're in the a-casual realm, which is important to the end of the story, that these aren't actual physical things in the realm that you can see and touch, right?
Right.
So these
Yeah,
are
and they
just
consistently ONA doctrines and theology, or what they would call praxis, always has this duality between the causal and acausal world. So the causal world is our temporal, five senses world, and then there's an acausal world where the dark gods are and all these other things that you're trying to influence or bring down.
Yeah, so the reason why this is important, is because in the end of the story, I'm just gonna spoil it because it makes the most sense. This shapeshifter, one of the most powerful of these shapeshifters, kind of morphs into, or kind of like fuses into, a human's body while the human is dreaming. The human wakes up and is set to the task of doing exactly what the shapeshifter needs, which is to acquire the mortal limited, or to acquire the essence of the from the temporary mundane vessel, right? The acasual energy that is the essence of the temporary mundane vessel. So that's the spoiler, just as I'm reading, so that's how the duality between the casual and acasual works. So this shapeshifter doesn't actually come on to the shores and kill people. They're presenced by a human being who does their bidding.
Right. So they're almost like the person is asking to be possessed.
Something like that. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So let me continue reading. So, I'm just gonna try and zoom to the important parts because I don't want to waste any time here with your viewers. So they come onto the shores to snatch these human beings to drain their casual energy. Silent, unseen, right. Their own earthbound place of unwilling dreary rest was beneath the sea, near the shore of that westward English town, whose long, curvy, sandy beaches, on sunny and not-so-sunny days, would often be alive and festering with happy humans. And it was there, to their lair, where these shapeshifters returned replete with victims, dragged, dead, or dying. And there would be no evidence for meddling, curious human vessels to find. For the body, the life of the prey would be gone, leaving no trace, as the sea would leave no trace with its flowing, soundful, tideful ebbing. No trace of what few marks she and her kind might have made, as one more of those she and her kind might have made, as one more of those the half-struggling, because caught, my God, this is confusing, because caught was dragged down to where the shallow inshore sea met the deeper sea of that unsea. So they're basically saying that the person is dragged down, half-struggling, to drown.
Right.
So continuing, no evidence, no dismembered corpse to float, bloated and bitten, back at high tide, no bones, brains, or flesh, nothing ever to be returned, leaving perchance only one more disappearance, unnoticed, or perhaps always unexplained. No, there would be no evidence for those human vessels to find, for she and they would devour or use them all, every ounce of human brain, muscle, organ, flesh, every drop of plasma, fluid, body, every inch of marrow, sinew, bone, needed as required. They needed the very casual life force that seeped out from such vessels, as and while those humans cried, spluttered, gurgled, and died. So let me read that again.
Okay.
They needed the very casual life force that seeped out from such vessels, as and while those humans cried, spluttered, gurgled, and died. Food energy to maintain such forms.
Right. So that is basically
the victim's drowning in the story.
Drowning, right.
The victim that they take to obtain the casual energy.
The acausal energy, right?
Is drowned.
But that's actually kind of a common theme, right? Of this kind of like you're supposed to capture spiritual stuff in your quartz triangle, or right? Quartz pyramid. So
there is some kind of weird flavor within the ONA that talks about like acasual energy and like basically absorbing energy within a crystal, right, or a tetrahedron. Which is kind of applies exactly to what this is. So what the kicker of this story is not that. What the kicker of this story is basically that they focus on a westward English town where throngs of people are exiting bars to the night. And that's who they target, is people, throngs of people exiting at the night who are drunk and basically easy prey.
Right. So they've talked about that in some of their writings, this same kind of environment, right? Late night environment.
Well, correct. So we talked about that in version 1. But in this story specifically, they're talking about that's who these shapeshifters target, is throngs of people coming out from bars.
And when we talked in the pre-show, you talked a little bit about another known victim, right? Does that tie into that, what we talked about? If you remember?
Well, yeah, I guess. I mean, from my perspective, I think, a lot of people have said, it's not, nobody's been caught trying to use this MO, right? Nobody's been caught maybe trying to abduct someone from a bar. Which
that's not true, because first documentary, Lanfear, he was doing that exact same thing. So it's definitely happening, or has happened.
Yeah, there's examples of that, but there's actual examples that place right back to the occult and Satanism, which is, I guess, what you were just referring to.
Right.
And the murder of Mark Kilroy in 1989. So I guess we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I can do it.
Because, yeah, sure. I just, in relation to the fractured flowing sea, the reason why this applies is because that's who they're targeting in this story, right? The person who wakes up from the dream and basically is doing the exact bidding of the shapeshifter, which is to go to these places and get the victims. And I'm not sure if it is to put them in the water or drown them. I mean, that's not quite clear, but it's definitely they're drowning in the story. And that's how they obtain the victims. So that's how this applies to Mark Kilroy, right?
Right. And so Mark Kilroy was really the first gringo victim of this satanic cult led by Adolfo Jesus Costanza, I think was his name. And it was in Mexico, just across the border. But the place where he was taken was Matamoros. So they're known as the Matamoros murders or something like that. But yeah, he was selected, and they hunted for somebody right at that time, right as the bars were closing.
And they were looking for someone who was a white male of that age as well. That was what they needed.
Exactly. It was intentional. I think he was like 19, 20, 21.
And quite simply, all they needed to get away with this is for Mark to separate from the group, because that's what happened. He separated from the group, and they basically just drove up on him and shoved him into a van. And he was 21, very athletic. Was he 21? Yeah, age 21, athletic.
Your standard SFK victim, yeah.
They didn't have any utility either. They just shoved him into a van. Their only utility was the van in itself, right? I mean, which shows how easy potentially this is in lesser supervised areas, right? I mean, in the U.S., you have cameras everywhere. In Mexico, I'm not so certain you would have cameras everywhere.
Not at that time. I don't think so at that time.
Good point. In '89, definitely not. Which is why I think in particular why we see the victims in the U.S. are near water. But we can talk about that later. Do you want to talk more about the Kilroy case?
Well, I mean, it gets pretty graphic, but yeah, he didn't end up well. And he was just one of many, though. I think he was like victim 20 or something. Which
is what's so scary about that, because you're thinking to yourself, okay, these guys this is like the last victim, and that's how they were basically, that's how they had polished their MO by the 20th victim. That definitely sounds familiar in terms of, somebody polishing their MO in the same regard.
Right.
But what is interesting about the Kilroy case is that they basically brute force abducted him, and he was drunk, so they were successful, but they drove a block, as the Wikipedia page says, and he was able to break free. And they had to chase him down again and bring him back at gunpoint, which is pretty messy. And most people can agree that, I mean, as the smiley face killers, or anyone who is trying to use the smiley face killer modus operandi in the United States, you can't have that type of leakage. You're going to get caught pretty easily.
Right.
Which is why we've been seeing a lot more utility, people getting creative with utility in the U.S. cases. compared to this case, not as brunt force. That's
Right. So these people are getting more sophisticated. There's less evidence or little or no evidence of anything. I mean, what's the one Sacramento case where that kid got? I mean, it's a perfect example. Just missing, then found in the river. 15 days later.
You're talking about
Layered. What was his name? The kid in Sacramento. I can't remember his name offhand.
I'm thinking of Shane Montgomery though as like a prototypical case, because Shane wasn't drunk, right?
Right.
And
I think they said he had 2 drinks.
Yeah, he
which is not drunk.
Low blood alcohol, but he was perceived as drunk because he was kicked out of the bar for falling over the DJ table, which, as I was saying to you in the pre-show, could have, somebody who's watching could have perceived that as, a cue that he was drunk. So, and he was also right next to water. So I think we can kind of talk about that now, the kind of sophistication. So you see in the Kilroy case, that's very rudimentary.
Right.
They're brute forcing it because they don't have to worry about cameras. They don't have to worry too much about, the kind of intangibles. But in the U.S., you do. If you're going to be
Right.
operating in places like Chicago, Wisconsin, Minneapolis, Boston, New York,
or Bristol, or Manchester in the UK,
yeah,
or
all
London.
sorts. So you had to think about it. You're like, okay, so how the hell do they do it, right? How are they getting so sophisticated? I mean, a big hallmark we've seen in cases is drugs,
Right.
which a lot you've mentioned that in a lot of your cases.
Yeah, GHB, sure. That goes back to Gannon and Gilbertson as well. Yeah.
That's a piece of utility that killers have been using. Not every killer has access to drugs, which means not every person using the MO can use the drugs as utility. But we've seen, a case's perfect example is the Patrick McNeil case. He was drugged inside of the bar,
Right.
and the killers abducted him knowing he was drugged, I assume.
I would assume that as well.
Yeah, which means they were using the drug as a utility. Another utility that people have speculated is women. So we know that, I mean, I'm just throwing it out there, Cryptonimus is a girl. And, if you had other girls who were, I guess, ONA followers, they could potentially be used as utility as well. I mean, I think that every boy would attest to the fact that if a good-looking girl came up to them in a bar, started chatting them up and said, for them to meet them somewhere, they probably would go on their
Right.
own by themselves and meet them somewhere, without ever thinking that they could potentially be in trouble. Because,
Right.
they're
Totally agree with that.
strong guy, she's a young girl. So there's another piece of utility. One other piece of utility that is interesting is electroshock weapons, and this is something that I don't see talked about nearly enough as far as I'm concerned, because you're actually seeing a lot of cases where criminals are being caught with these weapons, which means you can see it's evident that they're actually being proliferated around criminals.
Right.
And
If you're looking at, sorry to interrupt, but if you're looking at the screen, you can see the representation of the tricycle. So it's the mix of the Sith of Saturn and the trident of, which is the Greek
Neptune,
god?
Neptune.
Thank you.
Yep. No, it's I'm not even sure. As I said, I'm sure Ken Ami would have a field day with this stuff. But
Probably.
I definitely had to do a lot of research to get even close to, even some type of knowledge on this, because it definitely is pretty deep. But
this actual segment is what you were reading from earlier.
Exactly.
Pretty
Correct.
sure.
Yep. So electroshock weapons. So I was speaking with an ex-Green Beret who I cannot mention his name because we're not talking names on this stream.
Nope.
But he had a lot of interesting things to say, because we were talking and I asked him, we got to a point where we were talking about how somebody would actually execute these killings. And I asked him point blank, I said, how would you do it? How would you replicate it so efficiently? Because obviously the MO has been able to replicate it effectively and efficiently without being caught long term. which is not easy because where's the one case where it went wrong, right? Where's the one case where they had to, maybe it flew under the radar as a failed abduction and it didn't register as being connected. I don't know. But it seems like they've been fairly successful with the MO.
Yes, I would agree with that.
And you look at the Kilroy case, these guys, they'd already abducted 20 people and they still had trouble with this guy abducting him. He got away and they had to chase him down again. And, these are big guys, 21-year-olds are athletic. They can beat the shit out of you if you're not careful. So that's what's so interesting about that is he flat out told me, this is what he told me, is that electroshock weapons have a very interesting scholarship behind them in that the wounds that they make are actually not, the scholarship surrounding the wounds is not cemented. So different electroshock weapons will make different wounds on the body under different circumstances. So there's a double kind of limiter, right? So let's say you're wearing a thick shirt, it'll make a lesser mark. Let's say you're wearing a jacket, it'll make, it may not even make a mark, right? Let's say you're wearing a t-shirt, it'll make a bigger mark, right? Let's say you're using a specific type of weapon, or let's say you're using a taser as opposed to some type of other electric weapon, it would make a different mark. So what's also so interesting is that some of these electro weapons actually don't make distinctive marks. So they can be confused with bruises, especially if they are left alone for a long period of time, confused with post-mortem bruises. So if the body is tumbling around in the river and, hitting sticks and, getting all the post-mortem bruises that it gets.
Right.
A medical examiner is going to have almost no opportunity to see the electroshock wound on the body, let alone know what they're looking for to begin with. So it's quite interesting when I thought about that, because he also mentioned intelligence agencies. So he said that intelligence agencies often have to, use these type of, tactics to abduct people, right? To abduct people without necessarily having anyone see it or anyone, any big commotion happening.
Right.
And you've seen that in a couple movies where people walk up to somebody with an electric prod, right? Where the electric prod, it's like a small little stick with an electric current at the end, and they just stick it under the armpit and the person falls instantly. And that brought it back to me, and I started researching and I started YouTubing actual victims of tasers, right? And seeing how they reacted. And my God, they dropped. It's actually, in my opinion, one of the most perfect weapons for abductions. And it's not even close.
Makes sense. That's why nobody ever you never hear a scream or anything, or
instant out, and they're already drunk, right? It's just to kind of put them unconscious.
Right.
What's interesting is you hear a lot about these people not having jackets, leaving the club without jackets.
Right.
I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, obviously, it's easier to taser someone without a jacket, but I'm not speculating that anyone has ever used a taser in one of these killings. I'm just speculating that if, in the eyes of this Green Beret, if he was going to basically be, the Will Graham and put himself in the shoes of that killer, right? And basically commit what the killer's doing, that's how he would have done it with his knowledge and his technical skill, which is interesting.
And what was that article you talked about where there was directions on how to get into certain environments and get out without being seen? Wasn't there something in the O&A about that?
I'm trying to think about what you're referring to.
The comments about like the red light districts and things like that, blackout spots.
Yeah, I was leading into that.
Okay, sorry. I went too fast.
No,
if you need to. Okay.
I was literally going to speak about that. So you're right on. You're right on point. You're not going too fast at all. So this goes into utility, right? So one counter utility against these killers is cameras, right? So you're talking about it's a battle of the killer's utility against the state's utility, right? One of the main state's utility is these CCTV cameras. And one of the main objects of the killers is to combat that utility. So how do you do that? And I had no bloody idea. I mean, quite frankly, it has always kind of eluded me, and it's kind of I had never really had any kind of knowledge in terms of how they were able to kind of avoid the kind of CCTV cameras and what their plan was for that. Until I started reading these designs.
Right.
So within these designs, cryptonymous designs, she discusses blackout spots and red light districts within the concept of culling. So one of the spots where she discusses it, she's talking about people who talk a big game in Satanism, but haven't actually committed a culling. And she says, I've never heard from any one of you hint about blackout spots or red. I've never heard from one of you any hint about blackout spots or red light districts, or just dropping hints that lets me and others know that you just might have done it and that you just might know ways to do it. She's referring to culling here because this section is called Notes on Culling. Like usual, you got to leave it up to the usual suspects to say it for you, because that's how sinister some of you are. Leave the real sinister shit to people like Myatt and those nameless initiates out there in the streets and shadows to do, while you boys talk shit. So she's insulting people who never act and saying, I've never heard from any one of you any hint about blackout spots or red light districts, or anything that gives me any hint that lets me know that you or any others might have done it. Or that you just might know ways to do it. So, or you or others. So she's basically criticizing all the people that talk a big game, but don't actually know how to commit a culling.
Remarkable.
So when I read that, I mean, I initially thought to myself, okay, what could that possibly mean? What could those two words in conjunction together possibly insinuate? Blackout spot and red light district. Because essentially those have been the two largest hints. They never talk about a culling that they've done, or a culling that they've achieved, or there's actually no technical strict handbook on how to achieve a culling. There's stories like A Wordful Tale where you see people where you see their footprint, right?
Right.
But there's no actual handbook on how to commit a culling. However, this as I said was essentially the closest thing to her saying this is what you need to look for, or this is what you need to keep in mind when you're trying to achieve a culling, which is blackout spots and red light districts. So, I mean, what were your thoughts when you first heard that?
Well, it just makes sense that somebody is pre-thinking this, and there's a thoughtfulness or a sentience about it, as well as sinister. But when you look at many of these cases, you can tell that people are they're thinking about the CCTV. Where's the best place? Where's the best opportunity? And, I mean, the list is way too long, but there's so many elements and so many cases, whether it's in Exeter or Bristol or even Manchester, some of those cases, it's pretty clear that, people are trying to avoid, they know about the CCTV cameras.
Correct. So let's get into this, because this is actually a very important topic. I mean, quite frankly, this is the most important topic. You have the highest ranking member of the ONA at the time telling you that the major hints from somebody that shows that they've committed a culling are blackout spots and red light districts. You have to look into it. You just have to, especially coming from the same person who's talking about all this Saturn, Neptune. The god who presides over bodies of water is also the Vindex-like creature who will basically preside over the culling of people, right?
Right,
So
the bringing the new golden age, right?
This is cryptonymous. This is the same person, the leader of the Drex, right? So the most, the people who have taken the culling aspect the most literally. So it all connects. So I started looking into this, and I found some pretty interesting stuff, I think, and I would definitely love to share it with your viewers.
Yeah, please do.
So when you look into red light districts within the U.S., you find out that not every place has a red light district. In fact, most places do not have a red light district, a historic red light district. So generically speaking, a red light district is a street of bars, right? That's what somebody thinks of it as. But technically speaking, there are historic red light districts in towns all around the U.S. that that are right next to water. So the hallmark of a historic red light district is that it is right next to water because it attracted sailors, right?
Right.
They would build the bars right next to water, so the sailors would come right off the ships, see the red lights, and spend their money. So all the historic red light districts in the United States are right next to bodies of water, be it rivers or lakes.
Right. Or ocean, just the ports,
Yeah, I guess that's true as well, right? I mean, I'm thinking more the
internal landlocked areas. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm thinking more like the central, big areas of big smiley face killer areas. Although there have been cases all around the U.S. and on the West Coast as well.
Yes, correct.
So when I started looking into historic red light districts in the U.S., as I said, I noticed that not every place had it, but some pretty key places did have it. So I noticed that 6 of basically the largest hotspots for the smiley face killers all had historic red light districts. So I'll just list them quickly. So you have Boston, Massachusetts, which has the combat zone, which is Washington between Boylston and Neyland Street. And that's next to the Charles River. And I think everyone knows how many cases are in Boston there.
Tons.
I think you'd be shocked to see how many of those cases are actually right near the combat zone. So I'm just throwing out cases that I spent very little time on collecting. But Zach Marr, Eric Munsell, Dustin Willis, William Hurley, Eugene Losick, John Daly, David Mark, Franco Garcia, all within a 5-mile radius of Washington between Boylston and Neyland. So then you have Chicago, Illinois, which has the Levy as its historic red light district, which is the Grant Park area, and that's next to Lake Michigan. And there I have 6 cases there as well. I won't list them all because I'm going to continue. So then you have Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which has River Street as its historic red light district, and that's next to the Milwaukee River. You have Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I think you'll realize the theme that all these places are places where there's dozens and dozens of smiley face killer victims.
Right.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Liberty Avenue, which is right next to the Allegheny River, which has a particularly large amount of victims. Pittsburgh as well. Minneapolis, Minnesota, which has the Mill District, which is right next to the Mississippi River. So all these places have historic red light districts right next to bodies of water. And then New York, which has Times Square, Soho, which is Manhattan, and Hunts Point, Bronx. So basically, and that's next to the East River and the Hudson. So it's like sandwiched, I guess, between the East River and the Hudson.
Right.
So there's 6 centers where you have extreme hotspot areas, and all these areas have cases that are directly in the area of the red light district. So,
right, and I mean, you can look at this as what's interesting is that how few cases there are outside of bar areas, right? So you can go, like Omaha, Nebraska, or Wichita, or maybe there's a few there, but there's certain places where that's not happening.
Yes, and I think this is actually, so when I started realizing this, I started realizing what they meant by blackout spots. So when you realize what's going on at all these locations, you see where all these people went missing right in the areas of these red light districts, right next to water. And then you realize what could they possibly mean by blackout spots. You realize that the blackout spots don't exist inwards of land, right? Or they're a lot more difficult to decipher for somebody who's canvassing the area. Right. So if you were to be canvassing for blackout spots with cameras and you were to be in the middle of Manhattan, let's say, it would be near impossible to canvass for blackout spots. It would be very difficult to, figure that out. But if you are right next to a body of water, what that allows you to do is it allows you to put your back to the water, knowing that you have a 180-degree angle of blackout spot right behind you. And you can make your way forward from the water canvassing the area, right? So when you're looking for blackout spots, where do you start? You don't start right in the middle of an area of land. You start right at the water where you have the 180-degree blackout spot, and you move forward. And then perpetually you increase your blackout spot, knowing that there are no cameras pointing from the water inwards.
Right.
So that's quite interesting to me, why areas right next to water full of bars, which essentially are red light districts, right, which are bars next to water, are used, because you have throngs of people coming out, lots of victims, right, who are drunk, who are basically easy pickings, and you have the potential to map out areas of blackout areas that are not, that
are not covered, right? They're not.
There's no
thing, right?
Exactly.
It's pretty scary to think that there's that much written out thought about this MO. People, you can see the MO from the other angle, like this is clearly what's happening, but seeing it from the other side is pretty eerie.
And I prompt anyone who's listening to this to actually go out if you have a body of water near you and see what I mean. So if you have a body of water that's near kind of, some bars or something, just go there and put your back to the water and start walking forward until you get to a camera, right? And then you're going to realize that there's actually a decent blackout portion by the water. Some areas more than others, but if you're able to basically map out a certain blackout spot, and you have a red light district where you have tons of people exiting, and you have, let's say, an electroshock weapon, the MO becomes kind of easy, doesn't it?
I would say so. I mean, if you've staked it out and and then, you don't even know what happened to these people after they get electroshocked or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure that all of them are being electroshocked, because, you see that, your people are able to do it in the most rudimentary fashion, as per the one we just talked about in Mexico, where they basically just force the guy brute force into the car. The problem I have with that is we're seeing a lot of cases where the victims are sentient and not drunk. Dakota James, Shane Montgomery, they're just like a couple that come to mind. Guys who are, known to be not wasted.
Or not drinkers, not big drinkers, right?
Yeah, exactly. How do you get these guys successfully into a van without them, without any, defensive wounds on them, without using something that gives you the advantage, right? So yeah, that's kind of my perspective on that kind of utility aspect of,
Right, but it's scary to think that order's thinking about it, and I just brought up this. This was actually a document. Let me see if I can pull this up for the video. I don't know if this document is legit, but there is such a thing as the NCTC, National Counterterrorism. National Counterterrorism Center. But if this is a legit document, it's pretty interesting, because what it's saying is the Order of Nine Angles playing influential role among some RMVEs. RMVE is racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists. But this is from November 12th, 2020. And I think it's pretty interesting, because they talk about they want to raise awareness of the violent extremist symbology, terminology, and ideology better position to recognize warning signs. So they're really looking at the occultism. And this definitely, to me, has the aspect of reality. It says not for public release, but are you seeing this document on there? I think I sent it to you.
Yep, I've seen that document for sure.
Yeah. And then they mentioned Melzer, who I've written about. I know Denton, Jacob Catterley. So, there's a lot of people, but it's pretty remarkable that this document got out. I think it's an interesting document. I'll try to post it up on my webpage if people want to see it. So
the comment she makes about blackout spots in red light districts directly connects culling to water. Directly, right? Because she's saying that, that's how you do it with the red light district advantage, which is the ability to have a lot of victim pool right next to a blackout spot, or a potential blackout spot. But also, I assume that because they talk a lot about practical cullings and staged accidents, when they're talking about cullings, the word staged accident and practical culling comes up 50 times in documents. They specifically say that stage accidents are fantastic ways to commit cullings and get away with them. Because at the beginning, right, Anton Long in his canon is talking about practical cullings, right? You have to commit a practical culling, and a practical culling is not one where you get caught by the cops and are in bars for behind bars for 100 years, right?
Right.
As we discussed in the first episode.
Right. And I mean, the example is like this guy Von Nudegem, which I wrote about. Like, he got caught. He got caught committing a culler, and it's interesting that in some of these on his YouTube channel, like, people were saying, "Oh, you got caught killing an offer." They knew the terminology of a sacrificial victim and everything. It's pretty intense. But Von Nudegem is supposed to be in court, I think, this month, and so it's for real. I mean, this is a real event, and yeah, there's just it's just a pretty remarkable tie-in with the SFK killings.
So let me continue this. So
okay.
Where I found the blackout spot and red light districts was in an edition of Fenrir, which is basically like an ONA.
Is one of the early ONA missives or pamphlets, right?
Yeah, I found it in version 7.3, and Cryptonimus was the author, and it was titled "Some Notes on Culling." So some other interesting portions from that portion I would like to read, if you don't mind.
Oh, please do.
So the interesting and sinister thing about culling is that most, if not all, modern cullings, when done by a true follower of the sinister way, are disguised. That is, they do not appear to the authorities to be ritualistic killings. Some cullings, for example, are intentionally disguised as accidents. The followers of the sinister way, being part of an elite, will plan the culling well in advance and use their skills, their cunning, and their intelligence to not only choose a most suitable offer, but also to ensure a correct disposal of the mortal remains of the offer, and that the place of the culling remains secure and hidden, or that there is little or no forensic evidence for the culling in such a place. To me, that's about as direct of a kind of,
a statement like, "Yay, we know." Yeah,
we're committing accidents. We're making sure that there's no
traces. There's no forensics. They know the forensics.
How do you do that? How do you commit disguised accidents without any trace forensic evidence? You use water.
Right.
Everybody knows water washes away a certain amount of forensic evidence. Not all of it, but a certain amount. And quite frankly, unless you're putting them in that's not a staged accident, though, right? The only other way I could think of is you put them in acid or something, but that's not a staged accident.
Right. It's obvious that something's missing. That's the whole thing. That's the whole purpose of the water. It's fake. It's staged.
Exactly.
That's the key into all that odd ideology.
And that's
so
what
you have the puzzle piece fits. Yeah.
It's a culling, but they're doing that basically to make it practical, to make sure that they're not being caught for the culling, right?
Right, and you don't know where the real drowning takes place. If somebody gets abducted, you don't know. It may not even be taking place in that body of water somewhere else.
I'm almost positive it doesn't take place in that body of water. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
It increases the variables too much. So for these killers who are basically extremely intelligent and have created an MO that actually can be replicated and used efficiently, they're not going to be they're not going to be drowning that person in the body of water that they
close to where they abduct them.
Anywhere close to where they abduct them. Right. It's always going to be a third party location. And we've seen that because people are gone for too long. They search places. Right. They search places where they end up being found and they don't find them, right? And then they end up being found weeks later. So they're obviously being kept drowned at a third party location. Quite frankly, it's just way too practical not to do that, right? Or to do that. Sorry, it's too practical to drown them at another location. It's too dangerous to drown them.
Right, at the same spot. Like you're planning on taking them somewhere or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Also, who the hell knows who could walk up on you? For all you know, somebody could see you.
Right. So they have to be secretive. They have to do something. And if you read some of their literature, their like fables and stuff, there's a lot of secretiveness. There's a lot of plotting and planning type things. In what is it? The what's the one called? I can't remember the name of it. But there's like 4 stories, but yeah, I mean, it ties in with some of this more recent writings, but also the older writings they're still teaching people how to, you know, operate sinisterly.
Correct. Which is why Cryptonimus is such an interesting figure to focus on, because she was the person who was the main point of contact between anyone who was basically looking to call and looking for kind of tips to call. And that's why all these writings by her are so interesting, because she was essentially the one who potentially could have proliferated or distributed this MO around the world, because we're wondering how the hell was this distributed. There had to be a source.
Right.
We're seeing here Cryptonimus is talking about this MO, right, as being the source of it, right, as knowing tips about this, and she's saying that she was the one schooling everyone who wanted to become ONA. So likewise, it makes sense, it just naturally makes sense that she shared these tips with everyone else, which is why we see around the world people are using this MO.
This little MO, right? And there's different. I mean, more my research since we last talked. There's Nexians all over the place: Russia, Italy,
all with different flavors, right?
Different flavors, right? Definitely inspired by the original writings, the Naos writings, but yeah, there's definitely different flavors. You don't know what each one of those different cells. I mean, he's definitely talking about this cell structure, but he just renamed it Nexian, right? But I think it's in the what was the document that I read? It's the one about, oh boy, let me see if I can find this. Yeah, but it's Maya is writing to these guys at, what is it? The Satanic Letters of Stephen Brown. That's it. He's basically telling them that he's devising these Nexians as cells. I mean, we've already kind of talked about that. You still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm just reading something right now. I'm trying to think about how I want to tie this in. Okay, so let's continue here, because I want to give some more good examples of kind of how the ONA kind of transfers this MO to their people or to their followers.
Okay.
Which is an interesting, which is basically, remember we talked about the wordful tale,
right?
Which was the story about which was the story where we saw the footprint of the ONA kind of or the SFK modus operandi,
right?
And there's actually another story that kind of fits the exact same bill, which is interesting, because I guess the more of these stories you find, the more the point applies that they're showing people to do this, right?
Right.
And this story is called Lurker of the Night, and it's from Fenrir 7.1.
Do you want to read a little bit of it?
Sure, I would love to. Yeah. Okay, so we have a comment. He says, "Doesn't the abduction spot being near the body of water they're found in suggest the killers live nearby?" Interesting comment.
Not necessarily, but in some of these other writings, they're clearly these like couples are driving far away to commit crimes, right? What was that? I can't remember that article offhand, but
I think C. Mitch is getting at is he's saying that if they're going to be taking these people to third-party locations because they're not being drowned in those bodies of water, then it makes sense for those people to have some type of third-party location in the area, right? For that to be the case, you have to be local, right?
Right.
And also, to be able to canvass an area for blackout spots, it insinuates that you have high knowledge of the area. So
True.
There are interesting points to that. I don't necessarily think it means you have to be from the area. I think in terms of utility-wise, having knowledge of the area is extra utility, right? It makes it easier for you.
Agreed.
And I assume as well, there can be ways to drown someone. I've speculated. That's a really interesting question, because they have to have a third-party location to drown the person at. But you can have portable third-party locations. You can have a van and drown them in a van, right? Technically speaking.
Right, but I mean, isn't the purpose of the drowning, if you're a member of the ONA, is to absorb the acausal energy of the victim?
So it depends on the
The offer.
flavor. So certain flavors, including the vampire flavors, talk about this like absorbing of a casual energy. However, other flavors are more concerned with aeonic change and killing the dross, right, and making sure
Right,
the dross are helping natural selection along.
right.
So it really depends. It's kind of hard. That's the problem with the ONA is every time you try and typify them, you realize that the ONA isn't really typified by its flavors. It's typified by Anton Long's canons, and the flavors are just
Variants, Nexian variant.
variants. Exactly, yeah.
Right.
But no, that's a good comment though. So let's focus back on Lurker of the Night, which is another short story, which directly transfers the footprint of the Smiley Face Killer modus operandi. Which basically, so you have this character who's planning to go out on a culling. So he's planned the operation for Saturday night, a new moon, when the enslaved youth go into the pubs to forget their misery and meaningless existence in alcohol, and when the dark goddess lets her blood fall from the night sky. He soon arrived in the chosen town and parked his motorbike behind a deserted gas oil station, very close to the center and giving a good emergency exit just in case. From there, he could distinguish activities emanating from the center, where the humans had already began their soak, forming chattels of over-perfumed and really noisy animals. Carl leaves his helmet slowly and draws near the prey. Like a hawk, he begins to search into the crowd, slowly passing from one individual to another, scrying for the perfect candidate. The pubs now begin to close their doors, pushing out the young pieces of meat that will peacefully reach their apartments in cars. It's time to draw nearer. So that's, I think, is the most important part of the story. Inevitably, the story starts with him trying to go out and commit a culling. It ends with him committing the culling. He ends up stabbing someone, which is a weird ending, in my opinion, because it's kind of contrary to everything they talk about.
Right. There's not that many ONA stabbings.
There
This
was
guy Von Eden's one, yeah.
Yeah, one recently. But in this case in particular, I guess he stabbed the guy and made a quick escape because he traveled to a completely different town. So this is to see Mitch's point. In this case, the guy traveled to a completely different town, committed a culling, and then drove completely away from the town 100 miles away as kind of a strategy. So the only interesting part about this story is the fact that he's specifically saying that the best place to focus for prey is the people leaving the bars at night. And his prey is a homo hubris who leaves the bar and who is yelling at his girlfriend, and he follows him and ends up stabbing him.
Gotcha.
So this is the main place where they look for people who exhibit the tendencies of homo hubris, of mundanes, which is
Right.
bars.
Yeah, there's the bars. And what was the ritual where the ideal victim is a 21-year-old male? Forgot that one. Do you remember offhand? Was that the
ritual of the recalling ceremony?
recalling ceremony? Yeah,
Yeah.
21-year-old victim.
Yeah, 21-year-old male. So I mean, Fenrir in general is there's a lot of material to go through. And I mean, there's a mix of stuff in these Fenrir materials, some by Cryptonimus, some by Anton Long, some by Christos Beast.
Right. But here's the question. I think that's important, is who in this is really a rigorous, ONA rigid ideologue, and who is just in there for the walk or, dark friendship or whatever. I mean, that's the whole thing, is like, clearly some of these people are serious, just like in any other religion. And some are, maybe a little more lukewarm, I would say. But if somebody's really absorbing all of this doctrine, yeah, dangerous, really, really dangerous.
It appears that the Jarekians are the best candidate for somebody who's taken it literal enough to actually go out and do it, in my opinion, because they focus on, this whole aeonic change thing. And to me, that's the most important part, is not, necessarily the, zapping acasual energies. It's more, committing a culling, because that's, that's going to help along the new age.
Right. We're going to move to the age of Aquarius, or the new, what is it? The rise of Index, right? The representation of Index in the future.
Exactly.
Now?
Vindex associated with Neptune, right? Neptune is like a Vindex-like feature, Vindex-like character, which is what Cryptonimus says.
Anyway, we're almost at 90 minutes. Is there anything you'd like to kind of wrap this up? We could do another one sometime in the future, but it's pretty late where I'm at.
No, I think we've done a lot of good stuff. I mean, I've tried to kind of throw as much of the water / modus operandi connections that I have today out at your viewers,
Right.
So they can kind of look into that stuff.
Yeah, but there's a lot. There's just so much literature, and you just wonder, like, what these guys are thinking. Like, I was going through the stuff from Yorkshire. They had their own corpus of ONA related material. It wasn't straight from Myatt, Anton Long, whatever, but they were writing their own stuff, just like this one person you're referencing now.
I think I should mention that Christos Beast, who actually kind of handed off the direct to Cryptonimus, actually has a lot of connections to water himself. So he has an entire tarot card.
Right. Is it the Sinister Tarot? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, something like that, which basically paints a lot of occult pictures, and a lot of these pictures have Baphomet and culling aspects directly connected to water. And It's actually weird how much water plays a part in all of his tarots.
They're almost all there. In every tarot, there's water. There's a water representation, river or something, right?
Yeah, and then you have stars, you have Baphomet, you have, wolves, you have all kinds of things that would insinuate culling right next to water,
Yes.
which even makes me more think that the direct might actually be something to really look at here.
Great. And where can people reach out to you? Are you on any social media, or people want to send you an email or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Twitter, but I think the best place to go is to send me an email.
Okay.
My
What's your email
email is y.sarsky@gmail.com.
Cool.
And I apologize for my voice today because I was sick last week, so
That's all right.
My voice is a little raspy, but I tried to do my best today.
Well, I apologize if I'm tired. This is my second interview of the day, so I'm definitely.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah. Anyway, let's do it again soon. Let's keep in touch, and I really appreciate all the information and you sharing your research again. It's Igor Sarsky the second time. Last time was back in August, so hopefully we'll do it sooner than later.
Just to end it, I think I'm going to give you my I made kind of like a reading list, kind of like when you're in school, your teacher gives you a reading list. I've kind of made a reading list of every piece of material that applies. Actually, not every piece, more like the best pieces, the creme de la creme of material in terms of what relates to the Smiley Face Killer. There's 10 pieces on that reading list. And because last time we spoke, I told people that I would give them all of my literature. The problem is I wasn't really prepared. When people were emailing me saying, hey, I want everything, I didn't really know how to get them everything. It didn't really make sense either to kind of just drop everything on people. I kind of felt bad for them. So I'm more prepared now. I have a reading list prepared for viewers who want to email me.
Yeah,
but I'd also like to post it on your website if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem. You can post it on my website. I can put it in the show notes if you like.
Yeah, I think I've already sent it. I've sent it to you already anyway.
Yeah, I have it. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, and that's 10 pieces where I think anybody who wants to look into this theory, you read those 10 pieces, and after you've read those 10 pieces, you're thinking to yourself, I know Igor's theory now, 100%. Right.
Understood. Awesome way to end it. Thanks so much, Igor. Have a great one. I hope you feel better.
Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity.
My pleasure. Take care.